start tweaking pensions in order to make them cheaper, worth less, or allow people to come into them later in life, is that's a raid on workers' money. People have paid into it their entire working lives. They've made...
No, Ash, that's not how pensions works. Pensions are paid by current taxpayers. Because you have to make policy on the understanding that current workers pay for current pensioners. You don't pay into a system. That's not how that works. It's never how it works. The way it might influence policy is if you say, well, I've paid in, so I should get my pension, incentivize current pensioners to shit on current workers. This rhetoric has led to current pensioners voting to for current workers on policy because they think it doesn't affect them. Your current tax intake is now lower because workers get paid less. The government has less money to work with because wages have been squashed, and we tax wages more than we tax the things that have gone up, like capital gains. And then now they'll throw their toys out the pram that the triple lock is going to go when it's their fault because they voted for the policy that reduced the tax income that was being received by the government because they erroneously believed they were entitled to a pension because they paid in. No, current workers pay your pension. If you want to have a good pension, make sure current workers get paid well, right? That symbiosis it's key. It's key to understanding how pensions work and how we create policy to keep good pensions and good jobs. And by making that fallacy, Ash, you seed the ground for policy to get voted for by current retirees against workers, because those interests are pretty diametrically opposed normally, right? Pensioners more likely to own a home. Workers more likely to rent, right? So they want prices to be high, they want prices to be low. That's a conflict. That's a conflict that's been borne out over the last 30 years since Right to Buy. So you have to frame policies that's beneficial to everybody.
The thing is that whenever you start tweaking pensions in order...
I find it really depressing watching you two thrash it out.
So you're talking about Darren and Andrew here?
Darren and Andrew.
They're very fond of each other.
Apparently they're great mates.
Well, yeah. I'd hate to see someone you don't get on with. But my entire life, boom and bust. Whenever there's a change from Tory to Labour, Labour will come in, Tory will come in, like Cameron did in 2010, and the Labour lot left a note saying, there's no money left. Then the Tories smash the economy and Labour come in and say, we've got to fill this 40 billion, 9 billion, 22 billion, changes by the day. Who knows? Who knows how big this black hole is? And then you've got the arrogance of the Tory chap there saying, we were doing a great job on inflation and all the rest of it. You trashed the economy and it was starting to just about recover. Don't take any credit. That is disingenuous. I do not understand how out of 65 million people, or however many people there are in this country, we end up with economically illiterate people in the government. Boom and bust. Boom and bust. All the time. All the time. You are, not fit for office, these people. This is our money. This is our money. And I'm sick of being asked to pay more and more and more. I feel poorer than I did 15 years ago. Pay more and more to get less and less. And with regards to the NHS, you can tip as much money in it as you want. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and again and expecting a different result. You can tip all the money in the world in there. Nothing will change.
Okay. I'm tempted to say...
And look, sir, I hear your frustration. I will just say, though, that if I believe...
You also said you're economically illiterate.
No, I heard that. You're entitled to your view, and I respect it, sir. But I would just say to you, if I believed that nothing would ever change, I wouldn't be sat here today. I'd go off and do something else and not have to sit in front of audiences on national television trying to set out how we're trying to change things. I am optimistic about the ability for government and our country to rise to the challenges in front of us. I'm optimistic about the role that politicians can play in our democratic system, because the alternatives, quite frankly, are not a system that I would want to be part of. And look, are things hard? Absolutely they are. I mean, I've learned that in the first few months of being in government. Lots of things are hard, but you have to lift your head above all of the hard decisions and recognise that you're trying to take the country in a direction, you're trying to improve people's lives, you're trying to make Britain a better place to live in and to work, and you have to believe in our democratic system to deliver that, otherwise you lose all hope. But to come...
There was, to the gentleman's point, which I don't agree with, I don't think that's fair. Darren and I and everyone on this platform are well-meaning, trying to make some very difficult decisions dealing with an ageing population and some of the challenges on all Western economies have on public finances. So I don't agree with that. That's not a fair criticism of what any of us well-meaning are trying to do.
I find it really depressing watching you two. Council tax enforcement is uncalled.
Every year, millions are threatened with enforcement for council tax. You get a letter, then another, then court, no one listens, no one checks, and then you're hit with a liability order. But what if that order isn't lawful? What if council tax enforcement bypasses due process and violates constitutional law? Let's walk through the truth they never wanted you to remember. Constitutional rights still apply. Under English law, no one can be penalised or deprived of property without due process of law. That's not a slogan. It's the highest legal standard in this country, and it is still enforced today. Magna Carta, 1297. No free man shall be imprisoned, exiled, or deprived of property or liberty, except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Justice shall not be sold, denied, or delayed. The observance of the due process of law, 1368. No man shall be compelled to answer without being formally presented before a court, or through lawful process under the law of the land, and if anything is done to the contrary, it shall be void in law and treated as legal error. Bill of Rights, 1688. 1 William and Mary, Session 2, Chapter 2. Any fine or penalty issued before a lawful conviction is illegal and void. The law does not allow punishment before judgment. And as confirmed in Thoburn versus Sunderland City Council, 2002, the Metric Martyrs case, constitutional statutes cannot be impliedly repealed. They are the highest law in the land. That means the Local Government Finance Act 1992 and the council tax regulations must comply with these higher protections. They cannot override them. What really happens in court? You're told you'll be taken to court. You expect a judge, a hearing, a chance to defend yourself. But here's what really happens. The council sends a spreadsheet, hundreds, sometimes thousands of names. No one appears in person. No evidence is examined. No judgment is made. And yet, they call the result a liability order. Under Regulation 34-6 of the Council Tax Regulations 1992, the court must be satisfied the amount has become payable. That is a judicial function, but there's no hearing, no judicial act, and no lawful record. In Leighton versus Bristow and Souter, the court found that the council could not produce any court-issued record of the liability order. What they presented was just an administrative list, not a sealed judicial judgment. That's not due process. That's not justice. Regulation 35, subsection 3 confirms it. Regulation 35, subsection 3, still in force today, says it is not to be treated as a sum adjudged to be paid by order of the court. In plain English, it's not a court judgment, so how can it be enforced? It can't, not lawfully. Yet every year, enforcement agents act as if the debt was decided by a judge, and the council helps them do it by generating their own printouts, claiming these are orders, even though they're just internal documents, never sealed by a court. No Rule 66 record, no court minute, no judicial signature, nothing. Why enforcement is void? Here's the trap. Regulation 49 allows councils to issue bankruptcy petitions. Regulation 50 allows charging orders, but both assume that a valid court debt exists. And yet, Regulation 35, subsection 3 confirms it's not a court-ordered sum. So, here's the constitutional contradiction. The Local Government Finance Act 1992, the parent law, does not create a new class of judicially enforceable debt. And regulations can't do what Parliament never authorised. If there's no lawful court judgment, then there's no debt that can be enforced through bankruptcy or charging orders. No enforcement is lawful when no due process has occurred. This was never about the money. This was never about unpaid tax. It was about forgetting the law, forgetting that in England, the Constitution still binds the state, still protects the people, still reigns supreme. And it's not too late to remember that, because if they had followed the law, they wouldn't be relying on fake orders, rubber-stamped lists and intimidation. You don't need to raise your voice. You only need to stand in the truth. So now you know the so-called enforcement of council tax isn't just questionable, it's constitutionally unsound. This isn't about dodging responsibility, it's about demanding that the rules, their rules, are actually followed. Because at the end of the day, due process isn't optional, it's the foundation. Council tax